Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Stotra Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Stotra Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 4, text number 6. Text number 6. Same verse as yesterday. Bhuya eva vivitsami Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Yathedam Srijate Vishwang Durvibhavyam Adhishvaraihi Bhuya eva vivitsami Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Yathedam Srijate Vishwam Durvibhavyam Adhishvaraihi Bhuya eva vivitsami Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Yathedam Srijate Vishwam Durvibhavyam Adhishvaraihi Bhuya eva vivitsami Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Yathedang Srijate Vishwang Durvibhavyam Madhishwaraihi Bhuyaha. Again. Eva. Also. Vivitsami. I wish to learn. Bhagavan. The personality of Godhead. Atma. Personal. Mayaya. By the energies. Yatha. As. Idam. This phenomenal world. Srijate. Does create. Vishwam. Universe. Durvibhavyam. Inconceivable. Adhishwaraihi. By the great demigods. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I beg to know from you how the personality of Godhead by His personal energies creates these phenomenal universes as they are, which are inconceivable even to the great demigods. Purport. In every inquisitive mind, the important question of the creation of the phenomenal world arises. And therefore, for a personality like Maharaj Parikshit, who was to know all the activities of the Lord from his spiritual master, such an inquiry is not uncommon. For every unknown thing, we have to learn and inquire from a learned personality. The question of creation is also one of such inquiries to be made to the right person. The spiritual master, therefore, must be one who is samagnya, as stated herein before, in connection with Shukadeva Goswami. Thus, all inquiries on God which are unknown to the disciple may be made from the qualified spiritual master. What happened? From the spiritual master. Oh, I see. From the qualified spiritual master. And here the practical example is set by Maharaj Parikshit. It was, however, already known to Maharaj Parikshit that everything we see is born out of the energy of the Lord, as we have all learned in the very beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Janmad Yasya Yataha. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1. So Maharaj Parikshit wanted to know the process of creation. The origin of creation was known to him, otherwise he would not have inquired how the personality of Godhead, by his different energies, creates this phenomenal world. The common man also knows that the creation is made by some creator and is not created automatically. We have no experience in the practical world that a thing is created automatically. Foolish people say that the creative energy is dependent and acts automatically as electrical energy works, but the intelligent man knows that even the electrical energy is generated by an expert engineer in the localized powerhouse, and thus the energy is distributed everywhere under the resident engineer's supervision. The Lord's supervision in connection with creation is mentioned even in Bhagavad Gita 9:10, and it is clearly said here that the material energy is a manifestation of one of many such energies of the Supreme. Parasya Shaktir Vividhaiva Shruyate. CC Madhya Lila 1365 purport. Okay, I don't know what's up with this. An experienced boy may be struck with wonder by seeing the impersonal actions of electronics or many other wonderful things conducted by electrical energy, but an experienced man knows that behind the action is a living man who creates such energy. Similarly, the so-called scholars and philosophers of the world may, by mental speculation, present so many utopian theories about the impersonal creation of the universe, but an intelligent devotee of the Lord, by studying the Bhagavad Gita, can know that behind the creation is the hand of the Supreme Lord, just as in the generating electrical powerhouse there is the resident engineer. The research scholar finds out the cause and effect of everything, but research scholars as great as Brahma, Shiva, Indra, and many other demigods are sometimes bewildered by seeing the wonderful creative energy of the Lord. of the Lord. So, what to speak of the tiny mundane scholars dealing in petty things? As there are differences in the living conditions of different planets of the universe, and as one planet is superior to others, the brains of the living entities in those respective planets are also of different categorical values. From the Bhagavad Gita, one can understand that the long duration of life of the inhabitants of Brahma's planet is inconceivable to the inhabitants of this planet Earth. Similarly, the categorical value of the brain of Brahmaji is also inconceivable to any great scientist of this planet. Yet, even with such high brain power, Brahmaji considers the brain of the Supreme Lord inconceivable. Among the powerful demigods in charge of the management of the universal affairs, Brahmaji and Shivaji are called Ishvara or Adhishvara. Still, Brahmaji, has described Lord Krishna as the Supreme Ishvara in his great Samhita, Brahma Samhita 5.1 as follows. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. There are many personalities possessing the qualities of Bhagavan, but Krishna is the supreme because none can excel him. He is the supreme person and his body is eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. He is the primeval Lord Govinda and the cause of all causes. Brahmaji admits Lord Krishna to be the supreme cause of all causes, but persons with tiny brains within this petty planet of earth think of the Lord as one of them. Thus, when the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita that he, Lord Krishna, is all in all, the speculative philosophers and the mundane wranglers deride him, and the Lord regretfully says, Avajananti mang mudha manushing tanumashritam parang bhavamajananto mama bhutamaheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. Bhagavad Gita 9:11. Brahma and Shiva, and what to speak of other demigods, are bhutas, or powerful created demigods who manage universal affairs. Much like ministers appointed by a king. The ministers may be Ishwaras, or controllers, but the Supreme Lord is Maheshwara, or the creator of the controllers. Persons with a poor fund of knowledge do not know this, and therefore they have the audacity to deride him, because he comes before us by his causeless mercy, occasionally as a human being. The Lord is not like a human being. He is Satchidananda Vigraha, or the absolute personality of Godhead, and there is no difference between his body and his soul. He is both the power and the powerful. Maharaj Parikshit did not ask his spiritual master Shukadeva Goswami to narrate Lord Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. He wanted to hear first about the creation of the Lord. Shukadeva Goswami did not say that the king should hear about the direct transcendental pastimes of the Lord. The time was very short, and naturally Shukadeva Goswami could have gone directly to the 10th canto to make a shortcut of the whole thing, as generally done by the professional reciters. But neither the king nor the great speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam jumped up like the organizers of Bhagavatam. Both of them proceeded systematically so that both future readers and hearers might take lessons from the example of the procedure of reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. Those who are under the control of the external energy of the Lord, or in other words, those who are in the material world, must first of all know how the external energy of the Lord is working under the direction of the Supreme Personality, and afterwards one may try to enter into the activities of his internal energy. The mundaners are mostly worshippers of Durga Devi, the external energy of Krishna, but they do not know that Durga Devi is the shadow energy of the Lord. Behind her astonishing display of material workings is the direction of the Lord, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9:10. The Brahma Samhita affirms that Durga Shakti is working by the direction of Govinda, and without his sanction, the powerful Durga Shakti cannot move even a blade of grass. Therefore, the neophyte devotee, instead of jumping at once to the platform of transcendental pastimes presented by the internal energy of the Lord, may know how great the Supreme Lord is by inquiring about the process of his creative energy. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita also, descriptions of the creative energy and the Lord's hand in it are explained, and the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita has warned the neophyte devotees to be seriously on guard against the pitfall of neglecting knowledge about Krishna in regard to how great he is. Only when one knows Lord Krishna's greatness can one firmly put one's unflinching faith in him. Otherwise, like the common man, even the great leaders of men will mistake Lord Krishna for one of the many demigods, or a historical personality, or a myth only. The transcendental pastimes of the Lord in Vrindavan or even at Dwaraka are relishable for persons who have already qualified themselves in advanced spiritual techniques, and the common man may be able to attain such a plane by the gradual process of service and inquiries, as we shall see in the behavior of Maharaj Parikshit. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurinmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishthang Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamahyam Darati Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitangscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Bhuya eva vivitsami Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Yathedang Srijate Vishwam Durvibhavyam Adhishwaraihi. I beg to know from you how the personality of Godhead by his personal energies creates these phenomenal universes as they are, which are inconceivable even to the great demigods. So Vishnu Chitta Prabhu spoke on this verse yesterday, mainly speaking about some of the points in the first like 2 paragraphs or so. He was talking about scientific preaching, how, the atheistic scientists are bogus and all these different things. But I'll take a little different avenue in speaking about Srila Prabhupada's purport on this verse. Of course, it's very good to counter the arguments of the atheists and everything like that. But here, hopefully everybody here at least believes that there is a God and who created the universe and everything. And Prabhupada kind of devotes a big portion of his purport to, just understanding that there's a God, and then what do we do after understanding that there's a God. So for many people, they first have to come to the platform of believing in God, and therefore scientific preaching and things like this are needed. But like Prabhupada is saying, Parikshit Maharaj, he came to the table already understanding that Krishna was God. And from that platform, he wants to go further by understanding how Krishna creates this material world. And as we've read in Prabhupada's books, there's so much more to Krishna than just his material creation. But Prabhupada is saying in his purport that in order to enter into the knowledge of the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, one must first understand how Krishna is acting in the material world, which is present before our eyes, which is something that is readily accessible to us. So, therefore, from the beginning of Bhagavatam, we're speaking on the subject matter of God. People coming to Srimad Bhagavatam, if they don't believe in God already, they might just put the book down immediately. Thankfully, because we have Prabhupada's purports in the Bhagavatam, even atheists can read Bhagavatam and gradually come to the platform of understanding that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right from even before the actual substance of the Srimad Bhagavatam begins, in Srila Prabhupada's introduction, he says that this Srimad Bhagavatam is something which can equip one in battling the onslaught of the atheistic materialists, or something along these lines. I don't know the exact quote, but more or less that this Bhagavatam, the reason why the devotees scrutinizingly study this Bhagavatam and make it their life and soul is for the purpose of preaching. Of course, many times there's professional reciters of Bhagavatam, and they might attract so many thousands of people to go and come and hear about the transcendental pastimes of Krishna. And of course, this is very good, and the devotees they do relish hearing the nectarian pastimes of Krishna. But specifically as preachers, as followers of Srila Prabhupada in this Sankirtan movement, the central purpose of studying this Bhagavatam is for the very purpose of distributing this Bhagavatam. That if we can understand the knowledge which is being taught in this Bhagavatam, then we will have the weapons by which to attack the bogus philosophies of the materialistic, atheistic people. So this is why it's so important to read Bhagavatam and understand Bhagavatam in a systematic manner, which is from the very beginning being presented by Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. And actually, this second canto is really where the substance of Bhagavatam really starts getting rolling. The first canto is more or less an extension of it's more or less an extension of the Mahabharata. The subject matter is more or less in line with the same things that are being discussed in Mahabharata. But the second canto is actually where the substance of Bhagavatam becomes, it starts getting spoken by Shukadeva Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. Therefore, Prabhupada, he recommended, of course, we have this Bhagavatam 1.1.1, which is like just chapters 1 through 8. And Prabhupada, he wanted to see this book being distributed. And also, he was very happy to see that this second canto was being distributed as well. And actually, the Radha Landanishwara on the cover of this book, the reason why they're on the cover of this book is because they basically won the global Sankirtan in some year, and then because of that, Prabhupada wanted to have their deities on the cover of the second canto. And he wanted this book to be widely distributed on the streets, which isn't something that's even really happening so much today. They actually are doing it in London, which is pretty cool. But this second canto is really where the Bhagavatam starts like taking off, starts rolling. Initially in the first canto, of course, we open up with this amazing verse, Janmad Yasya Yataha. So Prabhupada references that in here. But this is really where we start discussing the philosophy of Vedanta. This is really where we start expanding upon this verse, first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Before now, there's mention of scheduled incarnations of Vishnu, and of course we have Queen Kunti's prayers. We have the prayers of Bhishma on the bed of arrows and things like this. All of this is coming before this, but specifically the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is really where we start to systematically go through what is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And another thing that Prabhupada mentions in the introduction of his Srimad Bhagavatam is that this Bhagavatam is not just a book about God. And you might think, oh, like what? Of course this is just about God. But actually, the conception of God is just one who is creating, maintaining, and destroying the material world. And actually, this Bhagavatam is meant to expand one's understanding of who God is as a person and understanding him as the supreme personality of Godhead. And with that being said, the whole Bhagavatam expands on just this understanding of Krishna as being God, and actually gives us an entrance into the understanding of who Krishna is as a person, separate from his apparent duty of being God in the material world. So that is what makes up a big chunk of the Bhagavatam. But you'll see that gradually we'll go through understanding how Krishna is God first, understanding how Krishna is acting as God, how he is manipulating the material energy. And then from there, we can actually start to enter into some of these transcendental pastimes of Krishna. And of course, Krishna isn't always exhibiting his transcendental pastimes. Well, of course, he is eternally doing so in every single universe. But as we'll read on in later cantos, we have stories of his Leela avatars, which are completely spiritual and completely transcendental. But he appears in a very magnificent way, whereby you can, just by reading about like Varaha, you can understand that this is not an ordinary boar. This must be God. And so like this, we hear narrations of incarnations of Vishnu who must be God. He has to be God because he's so incredibly great. And for the neophyte devotees, this understanding is something which has to precede any entrance into understanding the transcendental pastimes of Krishna in the mood of sweetness. And if you don't have this understanding of God and His greatness first, then naturally one will enter into these pastimes of sweetness with misconceptions, with offensive mentalities, and ultimately they will. Prabhupada calls it a pitfall in this purport, and it's like falling down in a pit. It's something that is instantly you're just down right down to the bottom. So this is why it's important to systematically go through Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is actually the scientific way of going through Srimad Bhagavatam. In the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, there's a chapter number 23 called Why Study Vedanta. And in this chapter, Prabhupada actually explains what is scientific knowledge. You know, like the atheistic scientists, the modern scientists today, they claim to be very scientific like this, but Prabhupada actually explains that this is avidya, this is not vidya, this is not knowledge, this is advidya, this is ignorance, because they don't actually know what science is. Of course, you know, the scientists will agree that science is meant to observe the nature of reality in such a way where we can, we can see what's happening in the present, we can see what happened in the past, and we can also predict what's going to happen in the future. And for this reason, there's so many millions and billions of dollars being, being, you know, funding this whole modern scientific endeavor to understand what is the cause of this material world, what is actually the laws of nature by which this material world is being maintained, and what's going to happen in the future. You know, of course, there's always warning signs that the scientists, they're always putting up their big red flags saying, oh, you know, like, uh, we thought that having these carbon-powered vehicles was a good idea, but now we decided this is actually not a good idea because we see the red flags. This is causing problems in the world and things like this. So then they come up with another idea, and then gradually, as time goes on, they realize that that was also a mistake. So in this way, they make a big show of being very scientific, and they might actually apparently make some kind of advancement. Like we see, like just 100 years ago, the amount of technology that was available is almost completely incomparable to the amount of technology that we have now. But actually, all of this is in the mode of ignorance. All of this is actually not scientific at all, because they're neglecting the real scientific knowledge, which can only be found in the Vedas under the system of Guru Parampara. And Prabhupada explains this in this chapter in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, that real knowledge is information which is gathered from the Vedic scriptures. Everything else is something, you can consider it to be avidya, you consider it to be ignorance. And this information, this knowledge which is gathered from Vedic scriptures, it becomes scientific knowledge whenever it's received from a bona fide disciplic succession. So you have knowledge, and if you are trying to gain knowledge without this system of Guru Parampara, then this is not a scientific way of gaining knowledge. It's an illogical way of gaining knowledge, because like Prabhupada explains in his introduction to the Ishopanishad, that there's the process of what is it called? Ascending knowledge, whereby one is down here and he's trying to understand, he's trying to pile on more and more information in such a way that he can understand things in a wider scope. And there's the process of descending knowledge, where you're hearing the knowledge from somebody who already knows about it. And the process of descending knowledge is actually the scientific way. You know, I really like using this example whenever new people come. It's like, so in the science class, you might have like a laboratory, and in that class, the teacher may say, if you combine hydrogen and oxygen, then you get water. And you don't have to believe him at first, and you can go into the laboratory and you can do it, and then you can see, oh, it makes water. And then he says, if you make like what is it, like sodium and chloride or something, chlorine, then it makes salt. And you don't have to believe him at first, but then you can go to the lab and then you can figure it out yourself. But after some point in time, whenever he starts seeing that the professor, everything that he's saying is correct, then one should renounce this system of going and doing a little backup check just to make sure. And one should actually just submissively hear from the professor, because this will save so much time, so much energy. This is actually the intelligent way of acquiring knowledge. And this is actually the scientific way of acquiring knowledge. You know, at no point in time has knowledge ever come from anything that was not first being given by someone else. Of course, we understand that Krishna is the cause of all causes, and everything is coming from Krishna. But even if you want to be like a lawyer or some kind of economists or specifically with like martial arts, with like warfare and things like this, the principles of following the teachings of previous generals and things like this, previous senseis, this is very, very important because these are the people that have practical experience of this. So even to some level, the modern atheistic scientists, they will accept this point that knowledge should be coming from a higher source, that knowledge should be coming from someone who already knows about this stuff. But the problem is that they see those who know as being those who don't know. They see the great yogis and rishis, and they see descriptions in the Bhagavatam of great personalities who know the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They give answers that are very scientifically and logically sound, which are answering all of the problems that science can't answer. But they're saying, oh, they can't possibly know, who is the cause of the universe or something like this. And therefore, they renounce this principle of Guru Parampara, and they whimsically try to speculate upon and come to their own conclusions. And in this way, there's so many different philosophies, and there's so many different branches of science that are going on in this world. Nonetheless, Prabhupada he kind of talks about this point in his the Easy Journey to Other Planets. There's a tendency in modern science where scientists are starting to understand that there's subtle energies that are at play that you can't actually see. First, it started with like the cell. They thought that that was the most simple and basic unit of matter. And then they started realizing that there's so many different parts of the cell. And then they started realizing that there's so many parts of the cell. And then you have the atoms. And then you realize that there's some subatomic particles. And then you realize that there's quarks and like all these things that are making up the subatomic particles. And then they say, oh wait, what are all these subatomic particles sitting on? What is holding all this together? There's actually this ether behind everything. So they're gradually understanding more and more subtle things. And Prabhupada said that it's actually a very good thing that the modern scientists are interested in this idea of antimatter. They call it black matter. They call it dark matter, right? And Prabhupada actually he quantifies the word spirit with antimatter in that book. And a lot of times you'll see him use that interchangeably. That Prabhupada talks about how the soul is actually made of antimatter, and that's exactly what it is. It's the very opposite of matter. It has all of it's completely opposite. It's on the spiritual platform. So in this way, Prabhupada said that it's actually very good that these modern scientists are gradually coming to understand that there is something beyond what is directly in front of us. And from this, nowadays, we have so many different philosophies coming around: quantum mechanics, string theory, all of these different things. And this guy was talking about quantum spiritual energy or something in that video at the tattoo festival. He said he's been studying it for a year, and now he doesn't have to work. Everything's coming to him. Quantum energy. Yeah, yeah. So, these are new things that like straight up atheistic people are getting into. And Prabhupada actually sees this as something that's actually good. And we can understand that this is all due to the re-spiritualization of this entire planet because of the Sankirtan Yajna that is going on. But anyways, I'm like going completely off on a different tangent of like what I was like supposed to talk about, which is the fact that intelligent people believe in God. Logical people believe in God because the Prabhupada gives the example of the powerhouse. The electricity, if you're seeing the electricity acting, say in like a little remote control car or something like that, and you don't see the personality, the personal influence upon that electricity going into that car, you might think that this electricity is very amazing. That you don't understand where it's coming from, but you know that it must be coming from somewhere, but you don't want to qualify it with anything. But an intelligent person, as Prabhupada is explaining, an intelligent person sees that the powerhouse has to be maintained by the in-house engineer, by the resident engineer, and the electric remote control car has to be plugged into the power socket, which is plugged into the circuit, and this whole system is there. And all along the way, the electricity being used in a useful way by like where we're seeing it with lights and all these sorts of gadgets and everything like that. All along the way, there is personality there, and an intelligent person sees that. An intelligent person sees how one had to design the motherboards, and one had to So many different people are involved just in like the simple flipping of a light switch. In fact, this was like a big campaign that they were like pushing on us in elementary school, that every time you flip on a light switch, just think of all that goes into it. You know, so many thousands of coal miners, and then the coal miners, they get the coal and then bring it to the power plant, and so many workers at the power plant, and all of these people, they have to feed their family, and you are just leaving your light on and wasting energy like that. So even back then, they were like saying things like this: "Don't leave the light on." But anyways, one who is intelligent can see the actual personality behind all of the apparent impersonal movements of the material nature. This is just what intelligence is. They can logically understand that there's a personality kind of moving all these things around. That matter never at any time just moves by itself, or just creates something by itself, or just forms itself in a way completely by itself. It might appear like that, but there's always something, there's always a personality at play. And ultimately, that personality is Krishna. Both the material and the spiritual energies are coming from Krishna. What is that? Maya yakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanina konteya jagad viparivartate. That's not it. That's talking about the material nature. Anyways, Krishna says that he is the source of both the material and the spiritual energies. Matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. That one who knows this is actually intelligent. That one who can see that Krishna is actually what is underlying everything. He is intelligent, and he might not know that God's name is Krishna. He might not know that he's a little blue boy in a village, as a cow herd or something like this. He might not know all these details, but the point is that an intelligent person knows that there is a God, and that God creates, maintains, and destroys this universe, and everything that's moving is happening under his direction. And such an intelligent person, he naturally wants to inquire further. The problem with like so many modern religions, so-called religion, is that they make a big claim of believing in God, but neither do they want to inquire further about who God is as a person, but they're not even interested in satisfying that God by performing activities which God likes them to perform. They have some level that, you shouldn't do bad things, you should only do good things, but they have no real understanding of what personal service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead means. Therefore, they're doing all sorts of abominable activities in the name of being spiritual or being religious, like opening these slaughterhouses, serving out barbecues on the Wednesday night, Bible study, stuff like that. It's like they completely in ignorance, they are performing activities which are directly taught against by the Supreme Lord, and they're still making a big claim of being very religious. They're still making a big claim of being very spiritual, under the pretense of just following some religion, wearing some type of clothing, associating with some type of people. Just like this, they make a big claim of being spiritual or religious. And the devotees are not meant to be like that. We have so many different things that are marking our bodies, showing us that we are devotees of Krishna. We're putting ourselves out there in the world. We're doing all these things. But if we ourselves don't have the conviction that Krishna is God, then how are we going to push this on anyone else? How are we going to introduce anyone into the real nectar of Krishna consciousness, which is Krishna's sweetness? We first have to understand that Krishna is God. We second have to understand how Krishna is acting in this material world, because this is what is right in front of us. We don't have any conception of what the spiritual world is like. The only conception that we have of the spiritual world is only based on our experiences in this material world. Prabhupada says there's beautiful kalpa vrikshas in the spiritual world. We imagine a big tree that can grow random fruits and stuff like that. That's not how it is, but we have to imagine something based on our experience in the material world. That's not the nature of spiritual energy. By making an endeavor to understand the material energy of Krishna, we can come to the level of Shuddha Sattva. We can come to the level of pure goodness. First, you have to come to the level of material goodness, but the whole point is that you come to the level of pure goodness by understanding Krishna's divine material nature. Daivi Hiesha Gunamayi, that this is actually a divine nature of Krishna. And a transcendentalist can actually, by fully understanding Krishna's personality being prevalent through all of his energies, he can see how even Krishna's material energy is something that is spiritual, because everything that is existing is meant to be for Krishna's service. And in this way, it becomes spiritual if we use it like that. But this is the point, that we have to First of all, understand Krishna with what we have, what we're dealing with here. In the material world, the only reason that we're here is because we want to enjoy the material nature. We're associating with the three modes of material nature. And in this way, we are completely bewildered in understanding who God is. Tribir gunamayer bhaver, ebi sarvamidang jagat, mohitam nabhijanati, Ma maybe of paramavyayam, that these three modes of material nature, because the conditioned souls are always associating with them, they have no hope of understanding that Krishna is someone who is above these things. And because of this, we impose our material vision upon spiritual things. And this is the danger of jumping ahead in Srimad Bhagavatam. We look at the spiritual activities of Krishna and we think, oh, he's just like me. He likes to have a lot of girlfriends. He likes to sneak out of the house at night. He likes to dance. He likes to do all these things. He's just like me. He's just like that guy. You know, he's actually a great personality. Don't get me wrong. He's a great warrior. He was a great king of a very opulent city. People like, you know, they whenever they look upon Krishna's divine pastimes with material vision, they ultimately they can't avoid making offenses to this. And actually, you know, it's important for devotees to understand that there's the liability of the conditioned souls, of course ourselves, but the people that we're preaching to. We have to understand that we are liable whenever we're introducing very high subject matters to them, and they don't even have a conception of the existence of God first. You know, what's this one of the offenses? You don't preach to the faithless. Ashraddhana Purusha. No, I'm quoting Bhagavad Gita. Anyways, it's there in the 10 offenses that we're chanting. I don't know. Anyways, that you shouldn't preach the glories of the holy name of the Lord to the faithless. What does that mean? You don't go up to some atheist on the street and then say, who is God? And he says, God is not real. And then you say, God is real. He is dancing with his girlfriends right now. You know, you don't just like go and like try to like explain God to them as Krishna, you know, doing his thing in Goloka Vrindavan. You first have to systematically and logically present God as something which is an undeniable fact to these people. And this is where the Srimad Bhagavatam gives us the tools by which we can do this. And if one skips over these different sections of the Bhagavatam and thinks them to be very unimportant, then they themselves will also have an offensive mentality whenever they're trying to relish the spiritual pastimes of Krishna. So this is where it's important. You have to first understand how God is acting and what is right there readily before you in matter. How can we understand that God is here and there and everywhere in you and in me, and is blowing the wind, is moving, you know, and so many different things. Once you can start to see how Krishna is ultimately everywhere and is everything, then you can start to understand Krishna's spiritual pastimes, because you understand that God is great. He is the greatest. If you don't understand that God is great, then you see his spiritual pastimes as being something that is, you know, even I can do something like that. So this is where it's very important. You have to, first of all, come to a platform of understanding, which is something which is like on our level, you know. And there's a Guru Maharaj was speaking about this. There's a very common aphorism that's used by those who are very well learned in the Vedic knowledge, where there's a star called Arunavati, and her husband is Vashishta or something like that. There's two stars in the sky. One of them is Arunavati, one of them is Vashishta. And whenever you describe where to find Arunavati, you first have to tell them, oh, look for Vashishta. It's the big star. And then if you look right beside the big star, you'll see the Arunavati. You'll see the small star. So similarly, if we're wanting to point people where is God, how to understand God, we first have to point them in the direction of something which is blatantly right there in front of them. We first have to convince them that actually there is a cause of this material universe, and then only when they have some level of faith in understanding that God is great, then they can enter into actually understanding Krishna's spiritual qualities, which are full of sweetness. Before then, there's no hope of them understanding, and if they make a big show of understanding, they're not doing themselves any good. They're not doing anybody else any good. It's just a big flop, you know. And Prabhupada explains this in this purport, that unless one understands God and His greatness, that faith really never arises. That unless one understands that Krishna, He's got my back, He's everywhere, He's within everything, He's controlling every little thing, unless one understands how Krishna is actually controlling the entire universe, he will never really give himself fully to Krishna. He can't surrender himself fully unless he has that faith. And what's that song? About like the marketplace opening up, and all the only price is just give a little faith. Kule che nam hata koroni time. Anyways, there's this very nice song where Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he writes this beautiful song where Nityananda Prabhu is opening up a marketplace by which you can come and purchase the holy name from him and achieve love of God. And what is he asking? He's asking for just a little bit of faith, a little bit of shraddha. So if we don't have that faith, if we don't have faith that God, He's got my back, then we can't purchase the love of God. This is the prerequisite. This is the only thing He's asking for. He's not asking for you to be born in a Brahmin family. He's not asking you to never have performed any sinful activities in your life. He's not asking for anything other than just a little bit of faith that you believe in God and you know that God really has your back, and you're going to give Him the benefit of the doubt and just give yourself to Him. Even if you can't give yourself fully to God right from the beginning, with just a little bit of faith and believing in God, you can purchase this holy name and you can actually become very advanced in Krishna consciousness in a very short period of time, given one is following the process of the scientific process, which I was explaining earlier, of Guru Parampara. So unless one really enters into this scientific process, which is being presented by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through Srila Prabhupada in this modern world today, then ultimately his whole spiritual life is just a big farce. And anything that he might show, apparently, anybody who might claim to be like very advanced or something like that, if you really look into it, first of all, they don't know who God is as a person. Second of all, they might be acting very spiritual in front of people, but more likely than not, behind closed doors, they're doing all sorts of crazy, abominable things. So that's why it's important for a devotee to, first of all, have a good understanding of who God is. Second of all, at least have the conviction and the determination to follow the process very strictly. Prabhupada actually, he says in this one, in like a letter or conversation or something, that if, people who see the material energy as being separate from God and wanting to enjoy that for themselves, of course, this is completely materialistic. And then they see us interacting with the material energy, with like money and, with these different resources that we're using. And they think that we're also materialistic because of that. But Prabhupada said that simply by following these principles and chanting your prescribed 16 rounds every single day, one's activities cannot be material. That even if he's apparently interacting with the material energy, it cannot be material because he's Krishna conscious. If he's really applying himself to this scientific process, then all of his activities are completely spiritualized. His senses are spiritualized. His activities are spiritualized. His place of where he's living is spiritualized. His associates, everything becomes spiritualized by the power of this Krishna consciousness, this very scientific process of Krishna consciousness. And this is something which can't even be attained by the most intelligent people. What to speak of like the human beings? We have Albert Einstein and even what's his name, Stephen Hawking's, and like all these people. You really look at them in comparison to like Brahma and Shiva and like all these great demigods and stuff. You look at them in comparison to that. Is the stream going? Oh. Oh yeah, that's the 10 offenses. But you look at these great scholars and philosophers in comparison to like some of the Munis and demigods and things like that, which are described in the Vedic literature, and they're really nothing. It's like they spend their whole life, and then at the end of the life, they just present like E equals MC squared, and like they might be able to explain it, but nobody else can understand it. Nobody else can explain it. Their whole philosophy has to be revised 10 years down the road, things like this. But whenever you look at great personalities like Lord Brahma, for instance, first of all, his entire body is made of pure intelligence. His entire abode is made of pure intelligence. he's got not only does he have one huge brain which he can like understand the entire universe, he's got four of them, at least in this universe, and other ones he's got so many more. And then and here we are thinking that we're very, 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 very smart. Lord Brahma has four massive brains where he can think of like the most, like I can't even like explain it. I don't even know what he's thinking about. I don't even know how you can look out of eight eyes at the same time and put a picture and like understand it, and like it just like jumbles my mind. It's like crazy. And like he can like spit out one Veda here, one Veda there, one Veda there, one Veda there. Like we can't even understand one Veda. What to speak of four Vedas? It's like Lord Brahma is literally the most intelligent person in the material world. Yet we're thinking that we're very intelligent, coming up with little things like the Big Bang Theory and talking. Yesterday we were talking about the evolution of the origin of man, origin of species, and stuff like this. We think we're very intelligent because of that. But actually, from the very beginning of Bhagavatam, what is it? Janmar yasya yato nwayari taratas charteshva swarat tene brahma hridaya adi kavaye muhyanti yat surayaha. Muhyanti yat surayaha. Even the demigods are put into illusion. This muhyanti. Even the demigods are put into illusion by the actions of the Supreme Lord. They even they can't understand it. The only way, what is this? Brahmad Hridaye. What is it? I just lost it. The second line of that verse is that the Lord Brahma, he was given this knowledge within his heart. He's so intelligent. He can think of anything. He's super super quick, but the only way that he can understand Krishna is whenever Krishna himself puts it in his heart. He can't concoct his own ideas. He can't do any of these things. Only by the mercy of Krishna, and only whenever Krishna decides to impart it upon somebody, can they really understand who he is in full. And then, of course, we have the Brahma Samhita, where he kind of like Lord Brahma is describing this amazing darshan of what he's seeing whenever Lord Krishna is imparting this knowledge into his heart. He's seeing the spiritual world. Already he's at the very, very top of the material world. He's sitting on top of everything, looking down, and we just look like little tiny insignificant ants to him. And already he sees such great things, but they're nothing in comparison to what he's seeing in the spiritual world, which is existing outside of this universe that he's in. And because Krishna has imparted that knowledge unto him in the process of Guru Parampara, his knowledge is completely perfect. His knowledge is completely scientific. And because he's already a scientifically minded person, because he's already very advanced in material knowledge, he's able to convey this message to the conditioned souls who he's presiding over. And so in this way, specifically our Guru Parampara is coming from Lord Brahma, as Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. It's first of all coming from Krishna, then to Lord Brahma, from Brahma to Narad Muni, to Madhvacharya, and then like gradually like this. Yeah, Vyas to Madhva. And so like this is the scientific process. And if we don't understand it in this scientific way, then naturally we'll point fingers. So it's like, okay, that's not God, that's not God. That person might actually be God. They're doing some crazy stuff. And of course, in the West, we have no idea about this entire pantheon of Hindu demigods and stuff like that. But for one who understands a little bit about how nature is working and understands that there's deities presiding over it, they might even after so long, they might come to the conclusion that Lord Shiva's God, or Lord Brahma's God, or Durga Devi is God, or something like this. But Prabhupada is explaining that Durga cannot even move a blade of grass without the sanction of Krishna. What is Mayadhyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam Hetunanina Konteya Jagad Viparivartate, that this material energy is working under my direction. This is Devi, this is Durga herself. And if she can't do anything without the sanction of God, then what to speak of us? What to speak of all the other demigods who are even lower than her? But this is actually whenever you. So on one sense, I'm trying to say you have to understand the material energy of God. You have to understand the material energy before you understand. But if you're just focused on understanding the material energy, then how can you possibly enter into spiritual knowledge or something like this? This is why Maya or Durga is the personification of the material energy. if you Durga is kind of like a curtain that is like covering us from vision of the spiritual world. And if we fully understand that there is a curtain there, and we understand the nature of that curtain, then naturally by the process of surrender and the process of, like Prabhupada is saying, the process of inquiry and service like this, then that curtain can be removed. So this is where understanding the material nature is very important, and this is described by Lord Brahma in his Samhita, where he says tishtati. What is it? Um, this verse describing Durga. Anyways, it's he makes the point that that Durga can only act under the sanction of Krishna, the Supreme Lord, and like this, the demigod worship is just completely brushed off as something which is completely illogical, completely crazy. And so many different times, especially distributing books at like Indian stores and stuff like that, Muslims might come up and then they say, oh, what is this? It's very illogical. What you're doing is very illogical. You're worshiping so many gods, some stuff like this. First of all, they don't understand what the heck we're doing, what the heck we're trying to do. But and they're right. These demigod worshippers, it's very illogical. But because they're completely attached to material enjoyment, they're willing to do the most illogical thing to try to get a little bit of enjoyment out of it. I mean, just think, whenever you really want to enjoy something, you're ready to do anything for it, especially drug addicts, stuff like that. The most illogical thing you're willing to do just to get that high or something like that. So similarly, the demigod worshippers, because they want to get a little, they want to get that boon from the demigod. They want to they want to enjoy in this way. They're willing to be incredibly illogical in their activities, and because of this, they're bound further and further to the onslaught of the material nature. So this is something which is very intelligent. Anyways, we're talking about intelligent people who believe in God, who want to know God, who want to serve God, who want to get out of this material world. This is what we're trying to talk about. For such people, they can't just act whimsically and expect to actually ascertain any kind of spiritual knowledge or really attain the supreme goal of life. They have to go through the bona fide system, and this bona fide system is something which is not exactly an easy thing to do. It's not exactly like it's not, it might seem to look like demigod worship. If you go to a demigod temple, they make the same puja tray, the same plate. They offer the same things. They might say some of the same mantras. They might do all these different things, but the whole point of all of it is completely different for us. And because of this, it takes some real conviction. It takes some real substance of it takes some grit if you really want to be successful in this process. You gotta really kind of muster up some courage and just like go for it. And this is why it's very difficult for those who haven't first developed a strong sense of faith. Whenever they try to go further in Krishna consciousness, whenever they abandon some of these so-called like beginner level stuff, like following the four regs and stuff like that, whenever they renounce these things, and then they try to enter more deeply into like the holy name or something like this is when devotees like really drop like flies. This is like what Prabhupada is talking about, the pitfalls of jumping ahead and trying to understand Krishna's sweet transcendental pastimes. So it's very important that we go through the process scientifically, soberly, with a level head. Really trying. Parameshwar Prabhu he's always saying this, that this book distribution is the best thing that I can possibly think of to do, logically, intellectually, everything. I just can't think of anything else. Staying brahmachari and distributing books, that's the only thing that I can possibly think of that is good. But if you have something better, then you should present it. You can present it to me. Halfway through, whenever you're talking, you'll probably realize that you're wrong, and then you'll probably be like, oh, actually, yeah, I see how I'm wrong. But even if you're completely convinced that there is something better than this, you can present it. But the fact is that you won't find anything higher than this transcendental system. that Prabhupada is providing to us. And he's providing it to us in the same way that Shukadeva Goswami is providing it to Parikshit Maharaj. And we can have the same result that Parikshit Maharaj had in the Srimad Bhagavatam, given that we make ourselves bona fide recipients of this knowledge, that Parikshit Maharaj is the embodiment of the bona fide hearer of Bhagavatam, and Shukadeva Goswami is the embodiment of the bona fide speaker of Bhagavatam. Prabhupada is clearly the bona fide speaker of Bhagavatam. You know, he's presented this in such an incredible way that it's very, very clear. He's a living Bhagavata. He is the Bhagavatam. You know, he is literally the Bhagavatam. And it's up to us whether or not we are able to be bona fide recipients of this Bhagavatam. And if we want to be a bona fide recipient of the Bhagavatam, we have to go through it systematically, you know, soberly, you know, gravely in a lot of ways. And you have to read through this Bhagavatam like, you know, in order, and gradually it'll, you know, it'll elevate you to a certain level where you can really understand who Krishna is as a person. You can understand that, you know, Krishna is not just God. That's something that's so insignificant that the devotees, they hardly even place any emphasis on Krishna being God at the perfected stage. You know, the eternally liberated devotees in Vrindavan, they're not thinking that Krishna is God. Sometimes they might think, oh, like, is this Narayan? Like, he's doing some crazy stuff. But all the time they're thinking, oh, I need to make sure I feed him. I need to make sure he's happy. I need to serve him like this. All of these ideas of Krishna being God get pushed over to the side whenever you see an urgency for service to him. You know, if you that's where whenever you fully understand God's greatness, if you don't advance further from that, there isn't any impetus for service. You know, you say, oh, God is great, God is good, let us thank him for this food, you know. And then you say amen, and you don't want to serve him because he's doing everything himself. Why does he need me? You know, why does he possibly need me? So of course it's spiritual to understand how great God is, but what separates the eternally liberated personalities in the spiritual world and those who just understand that God is great is whenever they enter into higher rasas, not just this shanta rasa of understanding that God is great, but entering into like dasya rasa. And this is where transcendental life starts. You know, this is where real spiritual life starts. It starts with understanding that God is great, and then I have to serve him. This is really what kind of makes the difference between somebody who is sincere and someone who is insincere. And insincere people, they might become very advanced in spiritual life. They might become very advanced in knowledge. You know, the jnanis, they might memorize all of the Vedas. They might do all these things, and then they'll just merge into the impersonal oneness of the Brahma Jyoti or something like this. They understand that this impersonal conception of God is very great. It's the greatest, you know. But after that, one must understand Paramatma. One must understand that God is everywhere. He, in his personal form, he is everywhere. He's in me, he's in you, he's in the atoms, he's in between the atoms, like this. And then whenever one starts to understand Paramatma, whenever one has some level of Paramatma realization, then desire for serving that actually arises. And this is where the yogis and things like that, they you know, for example, the four Kumaras, you know, they were very, very advanced in spiritual life. And then only whenever they started to realize that there's a whole other world of transcendental service to the Supreme Lord, did that really awaken some level of conception of Krishna's sweetness. You know, only when they smelled that tulasi that was offered to Narayan did they really understand that there's something very like transcendentally sweet here. So first we must understand that God is great. That's like just a given. And then if we can understand that, then we can inoffensively enter into hearing about the pastimes of Krishna when he's exhibiting his spiritual sweetness. And this is what we're all about. You know, this is what Prabhupada came to give us. This is like, you know, this is the life and the soul of the Vaishnavas, understanding who God is as a person in the spiritual world, and how specifically with Gaudiya Vaishnavas, understanding how Krishna is very, very sweet. And this is kind of like our target that we're going for. But you have to like understand where you're at, and you have to first of all understand that, like, you know, that God's always watching, you know? It's like he's always there. God is everywhere. And if you don't understand this, then you're just going to whimsically waste your human form of life. I remember as like a young kid, you know, me and my friends were wild. We would do crazy stuff. And like we would always try to like pump each other up to do like the craziest stuff, you know? We'd like make a big ramp and try to like jump our bike or like climb up a tree and jump in the water or something like that. And if like one of my buddies was getting scared, you know, you just say like, okay, let's say he's got like a crush on like Amanda or something. He's like up in the tree about to jump and he's like about to like get scared or something. You just say like, hey, just imagine Amanda's watching, you know, and like we would always do this. Is like just imagine that your crush is watching, and then they're like, okay, and then you know they'll do it, you know. You know, that's like an impetus to do like stupid materialistic things. But imagine that Krishna is watching. You don't have to imagine, he is watching, you know, and he's your real friend. He is that real person that you want to please with everything that you're doing. Just imagine that. Even if you can't really philosophically, intellectually understand that Krishna is watching, just imagine that Krishna is always watching you. Just imagine that he is like, you know, that you just try to please him in everything that you're doing, you know, and he'll help you out. He'll really really help you out because he's everything, you know. This is explained by him in Bhagavad Gita. It's like very basic stuff, you know, at least for like devotees who have been practicing for some time. If they don't really understand this stuff, then they'll read Bhagavatam and they won't really get anything out of it. That's why Prabhupada said that you have to first read Bhagavad Gita. You know, you have to first understand that what Krishna is talking about in Bhagavad Gita, or else you won't understand Bhagavatam. Because Gita, you can be an atheist and you can read Bhagavad Gita and you can actually start to realize, oh, actually Krishna might be God. I should probably believe in God, you know. But with Bhagavatam, it's already talking about, it's, you know, from the very beginning, Janmad Yasya Yataha. It's already talking about the creation, the substance, and the dissolution of the cosmic universe. We're already talking about God from the very beginning. And Bhagavad Gita is a little different. It's like, you know, Krishna, he's also systematically explaining how to understand him as being God, but he doesn't, he hints at it a little bit, just very very slightly, you know. He puts a lot of emphasis on understanding his material energies, but he just very lightly glazes over this whole other world of spiritual energy that is there. And the Bhagavatam is something that really expands upon this. And then even beyond that is the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which Prabhupada has mentioned specifically, that this Bhagavatam also contains descriptions of the creative energy and the Lord's hand in it. And this is where it gets really really serious. And therefore, in Bhagavatam, we see by example that we should systematically go through this and not jump ahead of like where we're at. But also specifically in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami makes a point from the very beginning that, you know, you should not jump into this stuff without understanding that Krishna is God, that He is great, that He is all powerful, He is sustaining everything. You really got to be careful, you know, if you want to like enter into like, you know, some of these spiritual pastimes of Krishna without understanding this point, then you're in for you know, you're in a lot of trouble. So these things are like super powerful weapons that we can use to destroy the atheists. You know, Prabhupada said that by stomping the face of atheists, we make spiritual advancement. So, you know, we can use the knowledge in this Bhagavatam to preach against these people. But if we ourselves don't develop, we don't muster up some really strong level of faith, then we can't really get the full benefit of what this Bhagavatam is like trying to offer us. So therefore, you know, the from the beginning, Shukadeva Goswami he's describing the Mahat Tattva. He's describing the universal form. What is that called? There's a lot of names, but like Vishwarupa. There's this other. Anyways, Virat Rupa is specifically what we were just kind of going through, and you know, this is kind of why. And then you get to like the fifth canto, and I remember like in the fifth canto, I was like, you know, okay, I get it. You know, I get this God. I get Krishna's God. Why do I have to understand like the dimensions of like the whole universe? Like, why do I have to understand this stuff? But Prabhupada in one of the purports in that fifth canto, right before all these things are being explained. Actually, I'd saved it somewhere. I thought I saved it somewhere. Yeah, yeah. So in 5:16.3 purport. Srila Prabhupada says that when the mind is fixed upon the Supreme Personality in his external feature made of the material modes of nature, the gross universal form, it is brought to the platform of pure goodness. So first we have to get in the mode of goodness. Second, we have to get in the mode of pure goodness, and then we can actually really start to get into it. And like just getting on to the mode of goodness is like a whole thing, you know. It's like is clearly, even if you're like externally like pretty clean, which we're like really kind of strict about in the ashram. Like if we see like Muchi your hand or something, like we tell you, even if like externally you're like Suchi, is like internally it's like a whole other level, you know, like actually having that internal goodness and really imbibing the quality of it, just material goodness is like a whole thing. So we have a lot of work to do. By hearing and inquiring and serving, we can really like kind of like develop this mood of you know, we can really become pure like conduits by which this spiritual energy can really flow through. We can benefit ourselves, and we can also benefit so many different people whenever we act as Krishna's instrument, whenever we act as a spiritual master's instrument, while being completely surcharged with this spiritual energy. So first you have to make yourself a worthy recipient of it, you know. So it's like a lot of internal work. It's a lot of like, you know, it's a lot. And but this is what it's all about. This is like the perfection of life, becoming a pure devotee of Krishna. You know, and Prabhupada says it time and time again, in every single word, every single syllable, even in the white space between the letters in Prabhupada's books, is just spilling out. Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. You know, it's like you can't avoid it. For somebody to like, so many times we meet people, they say, "Oh, I already have those books. Did you read them?" They're like, "Yeah, I read that one, Science of Self-Realization." "Oh, what did you learn?" And it's like they'll come up with like the most crazy stuff sometimes. It's like, oh, you know, I learned that I have to like become one with the Tao. And I was like, what? This isn't like like he was like, oh, I learned a lot about Buddhism after reading you guys' books. It's like, okay, you obviously didn't read the books, you know. Sometimes people they think that they're reading the books, but because they're like so materially attached, they might scan through it and then like come out with a completely different conception. But Prabhupada, he makes a really like, you know, he's very expertly presented this in such a way where even the biggest rascal, just by, you know, just by taking these books, looking at the pictures, just like touching them, he just gets him, you know, this love of God just like spills into him, you know. And once we develop a real taste for that, that's when it really gets started, you know. And like unfortunately we're like, so it's like you know, Prabhupada's giving us like this taste of love of God, but unfortunately we're still like, we got like a pack of dip like in the back of our mouth still. It's like we're still trying to taste like this nasty stuff, you know. So we might get a little bit of it from Prabhupada right there at the very beginning, but once we spit out all that nasty stuff that we're attached to, then we can really like realize how wonderful this taste of Krishna consciousness is. And with this higher taste, it gives you like unlimited spiritual energy to just like keep going. And it's like something that never stops. You just like only learn more and more and more. And that's what makes like Prabhupada's books like so special, like so amazing. It's like you can only learn more and more. Like I'm just like trying to memorize verses and stuff, and like even if you memorize like so many verses, to like really understand what they mean, just one verse alone, like you can spend lifetimes just trying to understand one verse alone, like this Ishvara Parama Krishna, you know. It's like just understanding one thing like that is like a whole thing, you know. So Prabhupada's books are amazing. We should read them, we should study them, and specifically we should distribute these books, you know. The Srimad Bhagavatam is like the life of the devotees, you know. It's the life of the devotees. So this is our life. This is the Krishna life, you know. We gotta like, we gotta thrive, you know. Sometimes you'll see things that are living, but they're just like kind of like wilted or like diseased and stuff like that. And in most cases, it's like I'll just wake up in the morning and I feel like that, you know? It's like I'm like here and I'm doing what I can and everything, but I'm just like spiritually like wilted and like, you know, really like suffering. But it's like your own fault. It's like you're in like the best possible place you can possibly be. Like literally this temple is like a place of like the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. You know, where the Sankirtan movement is going on, Lord Chaitanya is like there, you know. And like you're in the association of other devotees who are like super like ready to just like do it, you know. And like You got the books, you got like a place where you can come together and chant. You have like amazing cooks. You have all of the facilities that you need, and you're still like trying to like suck on that dip you got back there instead of really tasting like the nectar, So like you really just got to apply yourself in the scientific way. And for different people, is like it'll take a little longer. Like there's different like elements, and like you can like dissolve them in different acids and stuff like that. But some of them, they just take a lot longer to dissolve. So like we're all coming from different backgrounds. Of course, those who are coming from more pious backgrounds, they can like take it up a little easier. And Krishna explains this in Bhagavad Gita, but that doesn't disqualify anybody else. We're all actually all the Indians are gone. So like, we're all American. We know where we're coming from. So it's like we're here for each other. It's like a crazy world out there. But yeah, just become a nice devotee. Try to like not get mental about it. I'm like talking to myself right now, but okay. Anyways, we'll finish there. Any comments or questions? I think beeping. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. See the electrical. Now he has to put the batteries for it to work. See?
Regarding the point that you were talking about, how even those that take up to religion and claim to believe in God, and how they just put on like a big show, basically. You know, that's my train. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, because they disregard like the parampara altogether, or don't believe in the parampara, they're left. I mean, they have this completely puffed up mentality, although they claim to have so much faith in God. Therefore, because they don't have the mood of submission unto those who've seen the truth, they they're left just to mentally speculate. And you can see so many, it's practically a speculating religion. If you go on books, it's almost like every Christian has their own philosophy.
Yeah.
You'll meet a one Christian, and they'll justify in so many ways how the Bible may give them their empowerment to enjoy it. They can enjoy, they have all these mundane conceptions of God because they don't know what service to God really is. Therefore, they may say, that they have that birthday, like that guy on the plane. He says, "Yeah, my birthday is like my way to serve God."
Yeah.
It's bogus. Or like, some people may outright just say that they're God. Or whatever. There's so many, or that 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 you can make love, and that, like, that's fine. Like, okay, it's getting a marriage. It doesn't have to be for children. You just make love. Like, where in the Bible does it say these things?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't say any of these in the Bibles, but because like because they're so attached to sense gratification, they disregard the mood of inquiring from a higher source. And they may even say like they have faith in their pastor, whatever. But it's because they're not inquiring what service or surrender really means. The pastor may come up to them and ask me, give me like half your check. They're gonna be like, hell no, I'm not giving you nothing. I mean, what to speak of where the knowledge of the pastor is getting it from? They're the guy saying that they're God. So it's like, if you disregard this parampara, it completely ruins everything altogether.
They're not reading the books.
Yeah, they're not
None
reading
of the
their own
Christians,
books.
they're not reading the books. And if they are, they're reading the changed books.
Yeah,
The
edited
Bible
books.
is just completely like messed up nowadays.
Yeah,
At Okeechobee, I met this guy. It's really rare to meet like somebody who's religious out there. And like I met this guy, and he's like, "Oh no, like I'm good on that. I'm Christian."
yeah,
And I was like, "Dude, what are you doing here? Like, what kind of Christian comes to a place like this? Like, I'm only here because I'm like a missionary. What are you doing?"
yeah.
And he was like, "What you mean, man? Like, I'm here for like the good vibes."
Yeah.
Like he was like literally like talking like that. And I was
Bogus.
like, "Are you serious? Like, you think that like where'd you read like that you should do this like in your
Yeah.
Bible? Like, where is this coming from?" It's like there was another guy who was literally doing yoga, and I walk up and I was like, "Dude, you look like a yoga master." And he looked at me like he was about to kill me. He's like, "I'm not doing yoga." And I was like, "Dude, what?" He's like, "No, I don't do that stuff. Like, I'm a Christian." And I was like, "Dude, like you're literally doing yoga. Like you can call it whatever you want. Like whatever." And like he got fried out because like, anyways, like
Yeah.
these people, like, where in the Bible does it talk about
Yeah.
doing like this
But-
yoga stuff? It's like,
It's like, I mean, you see
There's
so many religious people at Okeechobee. I met like a Muslim with her whole like get up, the
yeah,
hijab, and
yeah,
a Jewish woman, and it's like, what is this? Like, oh, I'm
yeah.
Jewish. Like, what does it say in the Torah that you walk around like
It's
half
crazy.
naked? It's crazy.
It's crazy. These people, they like wear like the markings of like the religious
Yeah,
like people, but like usually like if I imagine going to one of these things wearing dhoti and tilak
and enjoying.
and trying to
And
like
just enjoy.
enjoy.
Yeah,
It's one thing for a devotee to go like incognito, and it's like they might get away with
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Like sometimes they leave these on, and you can still like
Yeah, they leave
you
it.
can still pinpoint them. But like it's like imagine like going there dressed as a devotee. Like how do you still enjoy? It's like one of those things which is protecting you whenever you go
Yeah,
out there. It's like oh look in the mirror. It's like okay I'm like I can't just walk into that like bar. I can't do stuff like this. People are
yeah,
expecting something from me. So whenever like you find people out there, they just make a big joke out of their whole religion.
yeah.
It's really unfortunate.
That's why like
What to
wearing
do?
dhoti and like tilak and all these is important. Some people you don't need to
Yeah,
wear this, you'll wear jeans. But you'll see like across the board religions who do have some, religious dress that they do tend to lean towards more like morality than
yeah,
say for instance
definitely.
like Christianity. They don't really have anything.
Yeah,
They just have their Bible. But it's like, okay, as long as the Bible's not next to me, then like I'm good. I can just go clubbing or whatever. But there's also so that, I mean that was just the point. It's like they have no understanding of anything because they don't
yeah. They
inquire
don't
from
have me this Bible called the Message. And like the special thing about this Bible was that it was like commented upon by like some like Edward like
Oh my god.
Hitchens or like like whatever. And like I was like, who is that? Like who is that? And she was like, I don't know. And I was like, what do you mean you don't know? Like he's commenting upon the Bible. He better be like some
Yeah,
big saint.
yeah,
Like
it's a big
I like looked him
guy.
up and he's just like, he went to like Bible college or something. And then he's like a smart guy, so he wrote like his whole commentary on the Bible and he tells you how you can apply it to your daily life and he leaves spaces on the pages where you can write like your
Your own
affirmations and all
definition.
this stuff. And
Yeah,
it's like
they get into that like Mayava like
yeah.
because like these self help like Bible books are like really popping now. Like everyone's
It's
like getting
bogus.
into
And
it.
like the Christians, they don't have any idea of like bogus gurus.
Yeah.
They go to any church and you just expect that the pastor is gonna like preach like according to the Bible and stuff like that. That's not the case. It's like they'll say whatever the heck they want and then
Yeah,
they'll
yeah.
put on the screen like a nice song about God and then like they're just making like a really big show
Big
about it.
show. Oh my, the pastors they'll put on a big show.
There are like some of these guys who like really try to learn the language and they really try to learn about Jesus' culture and where he's coming from, but like they never gain any traction because you'll see that people who are genuinely serious and sincere about spiritual life, they'll gravitate towards Eastern religions. They'll just like naturally, if they're really like interested in spirituality, then like you're not a Christian, It's like these people are just enjoyers. Like straight up. Like
Straight up.
if you really get serious about it, it's something that's super rare because most times when people get serious as Christians, they end up going towards something else,
Maybe like
Specifically,
Catholicism or something like if that, but usually
if that,
but beyond that.
if that. Most people are gravitating towards Eastern religion nowadays. They'll become like a Buddhist or something usually,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. Anybody else? Isaac.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Bhakti-Vedanta
Prabhuji.
Prabhu. My question is, I already made this question before. Probably I didn't pay attention or I didn't understand properly. This is not clear to me yet. Um, no, one of the offense you mentioned is don't preach to the faithless.
Mhm.
But at the same time, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the whole Krishna consciousness movement is about, go out, preach,
Yeah.
because you say, Yare Dekha, Kare Kaha,
No,
Tare
Krishna,
Kaha,
Krishna
Krishna
Upadesh.
Upadesh. Preach to everyone you
Yeah.
find out there. And I have a strong faith in the books. And they are powerful. They are transcendental. Even like you say, even like Prabhupada say, even we touch those books,
Mm.
you get benefit. And this is amazing. What do you think creates more immediately effect in people? Because these days people don't like to read. Most people
Yeah.
they're not interested in cultivate spiritual knowledge. Prashant distribution is also Sankirtan, as Vishnu Chitta she said yesterday. Yeah, what is your
So what's the question
Yes.
about the don't preach to the faithless? Like why are we preaching to the faithless? Basically, yeah. I mean, even Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he says that this knowledge should not be shared with those who don't have any faith in me and like stuff like this. And like one thing's for sure is that we're distributing books to like big time like offenders, like big time atheistic Mayavadis, you name it. Like so many times people eating like chicken wings and then they lick their fingers and like take a bhakta stack from me and I'm like, oh man. Yeah, and then they give it back. Then they're like, oh, I don't got any money. As they're sitting at a restaurant after they just like paid for their food. Anyways, like, so that we're giving books to like straight up like faithless people, But the thing is that we're plugging them into the scientific way of getting this knowledge. We're giving them Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada says, bring me to someone and let me preach to them, Like this is Prabhupada and we're literally giving them Prabhupada to preach to them. His books are not like his books like anybody can pick them up and start to learn about Krishna. They can flip to any page. Of course, there's like the recommended way. Read the small books, and read like Gita, then read, TLC, NOD, all these things. Read Bhagavatam from the front to the back. But like people can literally pick up these books anywhere, and because of his Bhaktivedanta purports, he can impart to them the real conclusion of this stuff, and he can like help he can like avoid having them like become offenders to the holy name in this way, preaching to the faithless. So like, and another explanation that I've heard of this is that actually, the devotees they really know Krishna's heart. That Krishna really wants everybody to hear about this stuff. He says to like avoid like all that stuff, but we know he really wants everybody to know about this stuff. And Lord Chaitanya specifically had that mood, and Lord Chaitanya's followers specifically had that mood. But that's because they're plugged into the scientific method of delivering this. It's not that we're just whimsically going around and telling people about like Rasa Leela. It's like just like right off the bat. We give them, even if we give them Krishna book, and even if they open it up to the chapter on Rasa Leela, they're still going to get the right impression of what it is because Prabhupada has specifically delivered it in such a way where they can understand it like that. So when it gets dangerous is whenever people are presenting Krishna consciousness from an unauthorized source, some bogus Sahajya guru talking about the hidden nectar of love of God or whatever. And then like they get that book and they're like, oh, I think I'm a gopi. And then they start like doing all this crazy stuff and like, that's whenever you're really making an offense to the holy name by preaching to the faithless because you think that you're qualified to tell them about Rasa Leela. It's a big thing. Prabhupada went to somebody's house one time, some pious Indians. I think they were like not so pious because I think they were like cooking meat there or something. But they had like Radha Krishna deities in their house, and they were like trying to be devotees. And then they invited Prabhupada there, and they said, "Oh, Swamiji, please tell us of Rasa Leela. Please, please, Swamiji, like this." And then, Prabhupada said like, "Oh, I am not qualified to speak Rasa Leela. Maybe you can do it. I'm not. I won't. I'm not qualified like that." Clearly, Prabhupada is the only qualified person to speak on Rasa Leela. So if we want to convey this to people, it has to be through Prabhupada, or another bona fide disciplic succession. But most other sampradayas, you won't really find any deep knowledge on things like Rasa Leela and stuff like that. That's really coming from Prabhupada's line, Rupa Nugas. So yeah. Anyways, it's like it's different. It's different than just straight up like trying to explain to people the intimate pastimes of Krishna and giving them Prabhupada's books. It's completely different. Because everywhere, like I was saying, everywhere in front to back of Prabhupada's book, it's surrender to Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Chant Hare Krishna. Follow the four regs. You'll see it so many different times. It's different. Distributing books you'll never be offensive for distributing books. You'll only please Prabhupada. You'll only please Krishna. It's the best possible thing. It's like, there's this devotee. She's a Prabhupada disciple, and she's been around the movement literally for like almost her whole life. From a very young age. And she said multiple times to me that the biggest fall downs that she's seen in for devotees is not when they're Sankirtan devotees, is when they're pujaris. That's when the big fall downs happen. Because, it's like you're personally serving Krishna, you know. Like I was saying, if you don't have like an attitude of God is great and you know like this, like we're supposed to be worshiping Radha Krishna like Lakshmi Narayana, you know. And if you're not doing that, then like you'll fall down hard. You'll make offenses to Krishna himself and like smash you, you know. It's like it's a big thing just to look Krishna in the eyes, you know. Just offering arti, just like staring at Krishna in the face. It's like you're not even willing to look Durga in the face, you know? Go and look at her. She's got like the teeth and the tongue, blood dripping, skulls. It's like, you know, if you really want to like look Krishna in the face, you can't, you don't even want to like look at her in the face and like, come on, you know? Like, this is people's conception of material enjoyment. They're not willing to look at Maya for what it really is, you know? That's what Maya is devouring, nasty, disgusting, you know, like really brutal like thing, you know. They don't want to look at the material world like that. They want to look at all her nice curves and graceful movements and stuff like this. But no, she's a deadly killer, you know. She's got blood dripping out her mouth. So if before looking at Krishna in the face, you should definitely take Maya a good look in the face, and that'll kind of like whip you in shape, you know. Prabhupada talks about how the Bhagavatam, because it's non-different from Krishna, first canto is like his lotus feet, second canto his like calves, and you move up like that. 10th canto is his smiling face. You know, above that you have the crown and the peacock feather, 11th and 12th. So it's like, you know, I don't know how I got off on that, but you know, it's different. Preaching to the faithless is, you'll never be offensive for distributing Prabhupada's books to faithless people. If you yourself think that you can preach better than Prabhupada, and then you start telling them about this crazy, you know, lofty stuff, and then you're responsible for committing offenses. But Prabhupada, he's never offensive in preaching Krishna consciousness. So if we're just giving them Prabhupada, then we can't be offensive either. So yeah, yes. For the
The
online.
Hare Krishna. Well, the second part of my question was regarding what is causing a more immediately effect in the whole population, the whole world, because like I say, those Prabhupada books are transcendental, very very powerful. But most people, okay, they can grab the books, and most of them, I'm pretty sure they just put it in somewhere and they never touch it, never. But for instance, prasadam is everybody, everyone likes to
Yeah.
eat, and do you think um, prasadam might be in effect to the next life, or might awake the Krishna consciousness in
Yeah, I
this
mean,
current life?
one thing's for sure is that just by taking prasadam, you know, of course, prasadam is Krishna, is transcendental, spiritual, all these different things. But unless they have a real grasp on the siddhanta, on the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, they can take prasadam birth after birth after birth, and they can remain offensive to Krishna, and they can be like this. You know, the books are those is that by which you can give somebody these books and they can become very serious devotees without even going to a temple, without even taking prasadam, without even associating with devotees yet, because they're associating with Prabhupada, you know. Of course, when you take prasad, you're associating with Krishna, and all these things are there, and that purification is there. As far as like what is like the most like immediate, like how do you get the most immediate results in preaching? It might seem like, you know, you do harinam and you know you distribute prasadam, and then you do like all these yoga like preaching programs and stuff like that. And especially with like these bridge preaching programs, it might seem that you're like getting a lot of traction, a lot of people are interested, a lot of people want to join. But the moment that you roll out the books and the moment you start teaching the real philosophy of Krishna consciousness, just see who will stick around. You know, if you give them that from the very beginning, then only those serious people will really like stick it out. You know, we're trying to attract as many people as possible. Therefore, all these other programs are there. You know, specifically prasadam distribution, harinam. You know, we're trying to attract everybody. But without the books, it's like they can't stick around. You know, to develop a real taste for the holy name without reading Prabhupada's books is impossible. You know, if you say, oh, I love Harinam, I'm not such a philosophical guy. I don't really read so much. I just like Harinam. You know, just give him a couple years, and it's like if unless he's some kind of great sadhu or something that I might know about, like I might not know about, then like that taste never really awakens. You know, you can get the taste for the holy name by reading Prabhupada's books. and you can get a taste for prasadam too. Like that's for sure. A lot of devotees, they don't. Most devotees, they start out loving prasadam. Everybody loves prasadam and everything. But sometimes, like devotees, they don't eat a lot of prasadam when they first start coming, and then after some purification, then they really start liking prasadam. Tyrese can tell you. But yeah. Anybody else? Time. Oh, yeah, it's late. Okay, if there's anything else, it can be like addressed later. Sorry about that. Last track. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubhascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namo.